Thermaltake has sent kit guru the Tower 300 for a featured build, and as you can see we have the Bumblebee edition. It's called that for obvious reasons. The thing is, the Tower 100 was Mini-ITX, the Tower 200 was called Mini-ITX but was just about Micro-ATX, the Tower 500 is ATX, this, the Tower 300, is officially Micro-ATX. So here's a banana for scale. And also some colour coordination. We're carrying out a featured build inside the Tower 300, and Thermaltake has sent us a number of components to go in that build. A load of fans, a 420mm AIO cooler, and a 1200 watt ATX power supply. That's a lot of hardware to go inside a relatively small case. So let's clear the bench and pull off some panels to see what the Tower 300 is made of. The main glass panel at the front pops out nice and easily. These two glass panels at the side, a simple pull. Moving around to the side panel, magnetically retained, fully filtered, colour coordinated. And the same here. And the top panel, you can see, nice and easy. And again, filtered. And then we turn to the rear. Pull and release. Magnetic dust filter on the outside of the panel. The case is more or less dismantled, but not quite. In the roof, we release these two thumb screws. Slightly tight, so a screwdriver. And out with the top fan bracket, which is supplied with two 140s. You can see from the orientation these are set to exhaust, and now you can see how the Tower 300 works. The motherboard is rotated 90 degrees, so the rear I/O goes up. That's why the PCI Express expansion is here. A graphics card hangs down here. This is where you mount an AIO cooler, and we have up to 420mm, which is why Thermaltake has supplied us with a 420. Airflow comes in from the right and through the AIO cooler, up through the power supply area, out through the roof. As you can see, the power supply goes in the floor of the case, and the rear doubles up both as storage and as cooling. Let's start putting some hardware inside the Tower 300, and then we'll see how the build progresses, starting with the motherboard assembly. My motherboard is this MSI B650M Gaming Plus Wi-Fi, Micro-ATX, relatively basic. I actually bought this board for cash money from Amazon because I needed a Micro-ATX board, and they're not the sort of thing that companies tend to send out to reviewers, strangely enough. ATX, loads of the things. Micro-ATX, thin on the ground. So that's what I've gone for. And doesn't it just look spiffing? Processor, AMD Ryzen 7 7800X 3D, and that's secured in place with a Thermaltake AM5 secure frame or contact frame. The SSD under that heatsink is a Sabrent Rocket 4.0, and the memory, we have some Thermaltake Toughram XG RGB D5, and it's rated at 5600 mega transfers. And that's the motherboard assembly ready to install in the case. The standoffs come installed, and we're putting the I/O to the top. There we are. Before we proceed with the build, let's look at these two accessories that come in the box. This panel would swap out for this if we had the accessory LCD display, which we don't. We've used those displays with previous versions of the Tower, and they typically cost £80 to £100, and you can use them to display CPU data, for example, or put a little picture up. So that's that. Obviously it's color coordinated to the Bumblebee case, and then we have this, which snaps in there as a cable cover. However, if you're using a long graphics card, as we're going to be, which is going to hang down all the way, then we ain't going to be using that. And we can put those two to the side. Okay, next up I think it's power supply time, which is this Thermaltake Toughpower GF A3 1200 watt gold rated and ATX 3. Load of cables. And a surprisingly small fully modular power supply for a 1200 watt unit. Just got to do a quick peel. What cables do I need? Well, big selection. Graphics card for sure, main power. I've got two 8-pin EPSs on my new MSI motherboard. One CPU. Two CPU. Not sure what accessories I need for the AIO, possibly none, so let's put a SATA in the equation and an old school Molex just to be on the safe side. I know there have been issues with the 12 volt high power connector, but when it works it's so much better than the traditional PCI Express. Second CPU. Remove this bracket from the rear of the case, attach it to the power supply. We're going to go fan down to draw air through the floor. And we have a sticker telling us about Smart Zero Fan and the operation of that switch there. I think I'll leave it off. That's fun. Let's just put that back. That snap-on front panel, as I push the power supply in, the cables actually push it out. So let's leave it out for the time being and I'll route the cables. And once everything's satisfactorily in place, we'll know it's all working. I think I better sort out the cables and then we can proceed. That's looking slightly more tidy. If we go to the back of the Tower 300, we see these black plastic clips which we use to secure cables in place. Before I install the CPU cooler on the right hand side and the graphics card in the left, I'm going to use the space I have to install some fans. I'm going to replace the stock 140s with these Toughfan EX14 Pros, and I'm going to use these 120 EX Pros, one on the power supply shroud and two around the back. Let's start with the two 140s in the roof of the case. So they're in this separate bracket and they are set to exhaust. So we see the hubs from the inside, air goes up top. These are the replacements. I could, if I wanted, swap out the rotors and put them in exhaust and then have them upside down, but that means you'd be seeing this side from inside the case. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So let's use them in stock configuration. And I think were this actually a PC I was going to build for my own purposes, I think I'll be inclined to Dremel out the extra bracketry because a lot of the fan is shrouded. The thing with these Toughfan Pros is they link together magnetically, pad to pin, and then we have a cable and we ditch all that junk. Much cleaner. And that assembly sits up top like that. That's much better. And now let's turn to the fans at the rear, which we will install in the rear panel. Before we do that, let's get rid of the drive mounting because we're not going to be using it. Out with the drive mount, and then the fans can go in that rear panel. The mounting holes in the back panel mean that I have to separate the two 120mm fans so I can't connect them together magnetically, and therefore I have to have one cable per fan. Not a big deal, but slightly more mess than I would have liked. Let's feed these cables through. And then I'm going to add a 120mm fan to the power supply shroud. Because it's in intake, but I want it to look presentable, I've got the reverse rotor installed. That's going to go on there. Sneak it under the 24-pin connector. And then we have 4 screws that will hold it down. And that's the fans installed. I've had a route around and I've found this LCD panel kit for the Tower 200 in snow or white. And look at this. Voila! So when I said I don't have the accessory LCD for the Tower 300, it turns out I do. Next we have the Thermaltake Toughliquid 420EX Pro ARGB Sync. That's a mouthful. Liquid cooler, which is going to go in the right hand side of the case. As you'd expect, 3 140 fans, a great big bag of accessories, and a hefty great big cooler. The Tower 300 has a rack in the side that I can remove. And I need to remind myself as I put the hardware in place, this is in intake, so air is being drawn in, and then the other fans can take it out the back and up the top. Installing the cooler was more tricky than I expected, and the issue is this cutout in the power supply shroud, which is very tight for a 420. 360 would go without any trouble whatsoever. I ended up having to put the radiator in place, and then I offered up the frame with the fans, and then I put the screws through. Putting in the entire assembly just wasn't going to work. Anyway, they say it accommodates a 420. They supplied a 420. It does accommodate a 420 if you work at it. Next step is to put some thermal compound on the processor and attach the pump and block. And then on with the pump cold block assembly. I think we can agree the cable for the tacho is rather long, as the header I'm using is only here. The final stage is our graphics card. And our graphics card is this Zotac RTX 4080 Super Amp Extreme. And I'm going to let you into a secret. This is my first hands-on experience with a 4080 Super. I've used 4080s previously. The 4080 Super is obviously a variant on the theme, but still my very first go with one. Happily, Dominic has reviewed many RTX 4080 Supers. I'll install the graphics card and then we'll talk about it a little more. Triple slot, and it's practically the size of a house. However, there is space in the Tower 300 and that's what counts. And then we connect the 12-volt high power cable. And I have to say, that's looking the part. When I asked Dominic what I could expect from the Zotac RTX 4080 Super 16GB Amp Extreme against a regular RTX 4080, he pointed out it offers more cores and faster memory than a regular 4080 for the same price. But you also get a number of RTX benefits. In particular, he mentioned DLSS, which boosts frame rate. DLSS 3.5 also offers improvement to image quality when you enable ray tracing, thanks to AI capabilities. capabilities. In Cyberpunk 2077 at native 4K, you might see sub 30 FPS. However, with DLSS 3 on, you could see up to 80 FPS, which is a massive boost. And Nvidia's Reflex technology reduces latency by about a third, which makes your games even more responsive. The PC's finished, the fans are set to about 50% of maximum speed. I've got a rainbow marquee working on the RGB, and I'm going to run times by extreme just to see how it performs, and also whether it's noisy or not. I have every confidence the combination of RTX 4080 Super and Ryzen 7 7800X3D will do quite nicely. Taking some spot figures from the LCD on the front of the Tower 300, GPU 2.6 GHz, GPU temperature 74 degrees C, ambient at the minute's 19, and in the CPU element of the test toward the end there, the clock speed dropped to 4.7, 4.8 GHz, and the temperature rose to a trivial 59 degrees C. Performance is good, cooling is good. Noise levels absolutely fine. The ability to put a lot of hardware inside the Tower 300 also happy. One point worth noting, as we have with previous The Tower designs, is that access to the rear I/O, which is on the top, don't forget, is slightly awkward. The fact you have the removable fan rack helps because you can use that to fiddle cables through. Connecting to the back of the graphics card is slightly tricky. Connecting thumb drives and so on inside the case pretty much impossible. Wi-Fi antenna and so on, you can forget about those. While I like the look of the Tower 300 Bumblebee, I just want to give this accessory a quick outing. It's a rest so we can lay the case on its side, and that means you're exposing the floor of the case on the one end. So we have this replacement panel so the top and the bottom mirror each other. So let's just install that and see how it looks. Switching out the bottom panel is a simple matter of removing the stock dust filter, removing the 2 feet, each secured with 2 screws, and then popping on that cover, and it's a mirror of the top so it's fully filtered. Functionally that's all great, but I think I've discovered something. Because the PC is laid down, it means necessarily this accessory LCD is now rotated 90 degrees, and the TT software from Thermaltake that you use to power the display, to upload an image or to display text has no function to rotate text 90 degrees. I wonder if that's why they didn't include this accessory display. I like the finished look. We can now see our Zotac RTX 4080 Super proudly displayed through the glass. It's a funky piece of work. Remember, head over to kitguru.net to read our full reviews, and also you can find us on TikTok.